prospects for the public keeping track of the government and keeping them under control, right? Finally, let's consider the incentives faced by the politicians, these are the people making the laws. The politicians know the facts that I just pointed out. They know that the businesses are aware of what they're doing. They know when they're making laws about an industry that the industry members are aware of those laws. And they also know that you are not. So, if you're a politician, you know that for anything that you do, there's probably only a tiny, maybe 1% of the people who even know that you did it. So, most Americans don't even know their congressman's name, let alone what he's been doing. The consequence is that the politicians are going to serve the special interest groups. Look, if one group of people is paying attention to what you're doing and another group is not, then, you know, who are you going to work for? You're going to be working for the people who at least know what you're doing. And why? For one thing, if you don't, you're probably going to lose the next election. Because the special interest groups are going to campaign against you. They will put out money to support the candidate that favors their interests more, and the average voter won't, because the average voter doesn't even know what you did. If you were to take a courageous stand supporting the public at the expense of the special interest groups, the public would vote against you, because they wouldn't know that you did that, and all they would know is what they heard in the television ads that your opponent would be running, which would be paid for by the special interest groups. Right, so, this is another problem about our system. That was about the laws that are made by the actual legislators, but actually most laws are not even made by the elected officials. They're made by bureaucrats in regulatory agencies. And these bureaucrats are maybe even less accountable than the politicians. So these are unelected officials in regulatory agencies. The agency tends to be staffed by former or future members of the industry that it's supposed to be regulating. Why would this be the case? Because those are the only people who know what's going on. So you have a choice. You can either put somebody in charge who doesn't know anything about the industry, or you can put somebody who's been working in the industry, right? Or has been studying to work in the industry in the future. So the result is, first of all, the regulatory agencies have very little accountability. You can't vote them out of office. The members of Congress have very little accountability in the first place because nobody knows what they're doing. The bureaucrats have even less accountability because you can't even vote them out of office even if you did know what they were doing. And the agencies are often biased in favor of the industry that they're supposed to be regulating. Right, so my conclusion from this section is the problem is built into the political and economic system. It's not an accident that special interest groups control the country. It's not like, whoa, whoops, you know, that just happened. And it's not even a result of just a few bad actors. It's the nature of the system. If you kicked out everybody who was in there, 10 years from now, the same thing would be happening again, because it's in the structure of incentives. All right, so now we come to the question of what can be done, and unfortunately, I don't have very good suggestions about this, because from what I just said, it looks like it's basically about impossible to fix. I'm afraid that might be true. Now, I have some programmatic remarks. I'm not sure how well you will like them, but the first is that laws in general should be much fewer and much simpler. And the thinking behind this is only if that were so would the average member of the public be capable of understanding them. If the laws are so numerous and so complicated that hardly anybody knows more than a tiny fraction of them or understands them, then there's no way that the public is going to be able to keep track and make sure that they're in their interests. The only way is if we're in a pretty simple system. Right. As a voter, I suggest that you should generally assume that if you don't understand the law, it's probably against your interests. Partly because that's just true of most laws in general, but also because if you don't understand it, they probably wrote it that way so that you wouldn't understand it. They probably don't want you to understand it. My second suggestion is there should be fewer regulatory agencies. Now, I believe many people in the Occupy movement probably think that we need a lot more regulation, and I think the reverse. Actually, I'm not sure there should be any regulatory agencies at all. The point of democracy, I thought, was that we elect these people to make the laws. What business do these bureaucrats have making laws? They weren't even elected, so I'm not sure why that's even legitimate in a democratic system. I'm not sure that the Constitution ever authorized the Congress to make further bodies to make laws that are staffed by unelected officials. And my last suggestion, my more creative suggestion, is there should be something called a negative legislature. We already have a positive legislature. You're familiar with that. In fact, as far as I know, every legislature in the world is only a positive legislature. Its job is to make laws. They are capable of repealing laws, but they see their job as being to make laws. My proposal is, just as a general matter about the structure of governments, is that they should have negative legislatures, which would be bodies like the legislature, but their only job would be to repeal laws. They would have only one power. It would be to get rid of a law that was passed by the positive legislature. Now, this doesn't completely solve the problem, because you could have special interest groups lobbying the negative legislature to not repeal laws. That is true. However, I'm suggesting that it at least puts a further obstacle in their way. It at least makes it a little bit more difficult. Is first they spend all this money lobbying to get this law passed, and then it just is taken out by the negative legislature. So it makes it a little bit harder for them. All right, now I'm concluding with a quotation from Thomas Jefferson, which I will read to you. A wise and frugal government, which shall leave men free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government. All right, so now I think we have some time for some questions in the audience. Okay, yes?
About the regulation thing, or the lack of regulatory agencies, rather. I understand that in a utopian society where we can all get along and we can all be nice to one another, that's probably a good thing to do. But how do you stop something like Halliburton with the private military and lots of money from peeing in my water?
Right, well, my proposal wasn't to eliminate all laws, but my claim is that it's the responsibility of Congress to make the laws, right, not the regulatory agencies.
So, understood, thank you.
Yeah. And of course, this could only happen if the laws were simpler than they are now. Right. Yeah.
So, with your suggestions, how would campaign finance reform, or taking money all the way, like completely out of campaigns, or at least corporation money, how is that not a partial solution? Because then at least we'll have our representation of that.
Yeah, it is a partial solution, but only partial, right? So it's still the case that most voters don't know the laws, right? So, yeah, you can have it so that there's less money in the campaigns and then there are fewer commercials, and then it winds up being that the voters are merely ignorant.
But then at least you won't have these incredibly complicated systems because there's no pushing for these regulations if they're only that thing.
No, well, you also have, I guess you have to also prohibit people from going, like sending the lobbyists to Washington to even talk to the Congress people. I mean, as I see it, the basic problem is there's one group of people who knows the law and there's another group who doesn't. The ones who know are just going to get their way. I mean, and you can, like if you reform campaign finance, then you can kind of decrease the incentives, but there's still that basic situation, right? Okay, yes. It's hard to indicate a specific person. Okay, the white shirt guy there. Yes.
Okay. So, another solution could another solution be to make law school a lot cheaper, so that when people graduate from law school, they can go into fields they want to, like public service law, rather than going into corporate law, so they can jail, so they can pay off their student loans.
Yeah. So, well, this is a solution maybe to a local problem having to do with the law, right? But I'm not sure how you make law school a lot cheaper. Were you going to propose something on that?